Okay, I think we're going to go ahead as it is just a couple minutes past 6:30 and get started. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us. I've met some of you in person and some of you on Zoom, but I'm Alicia LaMagdeleine, head of school. We haven't met yet. Couple of announcement reminders as we get started. First off, we are recording this because we had some parents who weren't able to attend. So we will be sharing out a link, just so you are mindful of that. For anyone who's not here, or if you have to jump off for any reason, like perhaps to watch more of the boys JV game against Brebeuf, feel free to do that because we are recording. Second thing is we're going to ask that you leave your microphones on mute. And because we are such a large group, if you have questions that come up, please type them in the chat. Nyla Neely, our communications coordinator, is here and monitoring that, and will feed questions to Dr. Dave Vesper and myself kind of as we move through things. The third is I would ask for a slight bit of grace if I have to move my cat off the table because I'm Zooming from home, and as some of you know, our pets like to photobomb. But I think I've gotten him taken care of. Welcome tonight. We're going to go through a number of things, but I want to first start off by saying I continue to be impressed by your students, by your commitment to university in this difficult time. It is amazing to me how the deep-rooted foundation of our values of things like mutual respect and support and trust, of stewardship, things that as an institution we've been working on and practicing and living for 20 plus years have really helped us in what's been a tremendously difficult year. And I appreciate everything that you have done as parents to get your kids to school, whether they're at home or on campus, to be adaptable, to be flexible, and most of all, to be safe. So thank you very much for that. Dave, if you could go ahead, I'm gonna show the agenda quickly. So I'm going to do some brief updates on where we are as a school, some celebratory things that's happened recently, but then also specifically some COVID-19 related updates on what we're doing, how we've seen COVID-19 manifest itself in the school in the local area. Then Dave Vesper, our associate head of school, is going to run you through our interpretation and what we're doing with some of the new COVID policies that have come out from the state and the Center for Disease Control. The Center for Disease Control just released a new policy update for schools on Friday. So we've kind of read through that and thought about what our plans need to be, how we need to think about the rest of this semester, and then certainly talk about next fall. And then we'll take questions, like I said, from the chat. So if anything comes up on your mind, please drop it in there and we hope to be able to answer it. So want to start with just some stuff that's happening at the school. Dave, if you want to move to the next slide, I've included a couple of things here. First off, we're in the middle of a great Black History Month celebration that's being run by our students in Black Affinity, by our Equity and Justice Committee of the faculty, by Justin Blanding, who's our Director of Diversity and Equity, and Ladea Conde, who's our Black Affinity sponsor. If you have not checked out our morning meeting channel, which is the Twitch link there, all of our morning meetings, including these ones that we've been doing for Black History Month, are up there on Twitch. So if you want a true sense of kind of some of the thoughtful things, the wacky things, the interesting things that are happening at university, and you have a few minutes, you can go through there and just kind of scroll through the library of events and presentations that we've had. Some of them have been quite well done, particularly this month. Last weekend, we had great news. Our boys basketball team won their 4th straight PAC championship. So that's our conference. And tonight, the varsity JV is playing right now, Brebeuf, and varsity is playing at 7:20-ish. So we'll send out the slide deck, and there's a YouTube link. You can watch our stream of that if you're interested tonight. Our girls basketball team is the regional champions. They won 2 games this Saturday, which has put them in the final 4 of the state, which is called the semi-state level, if you're new to basketball in Indiana. And they will play at 5 p.m. on Saturday in Jasper, Indiana, down in southern Indiana. And that is streaming on the link there if you want to watch that game and cheer our girls on. We also just had, it was kind of a big week for announcements, 9 students recognized as regional award winners in the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards contest. This is a national contest of art, photography, writing, essays, poetry, and we are very proud. 9 students, some of them winning multiple awards. tremendously proud of the work that they've done. So there's a lot of good things that are happening. And I wanted to remind us of that as we think about some of the more difficult things that have been happening this year. So in terms of COVID-19, just a little snapshot of where we are. We have 338 students this semester. 86% of the school is in hybrid learning, so they're coming on campus for some portion with regularity. Sometimes they have to quarantine, but their intent is to be on campus. We do have 14% that have opted for full e-learning, so they are, for a variety of reasons, personal health concerns, home health concerns, in full e-learning still. That's about, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, that's about 14% is about where it's been for most of the year. We had, leading up to Thanksgiving and winter break, kind of an uptick of students choosing e-learning, but 14% has been about our average. Does that sound right, Dave?
Yeah, it started maybe closer to 10 in August and has crept up over the year a little bit, but it's been 14 for several months.
Yes. Since August, we've had 7 considered reportable positive cases, meaning the student was symptomatic and tested positive after time on campus. We've actually had 18 cases total in the school, but that includes a number of people who tested positive over winter break and then weren't on campus at all for any point in time. So we're still seeing overall very low numbers of positivity within the university community. We're paying attention to a number of factors about reopening in the fall, but specifically about this spring. One is faculty vaccination. Originally, we were looking at teachers being in a category that might have been vaccinated by February or March. We do have some teachers who have been able to get their vaccinations, mostly because of their age, or a few because they volunteer in certain facilities that are considered frontline health workers. Teachers as a category has been moved behind anyone 50 and up, which is part of the governor's plan. So we're looking at vaccination of our faculty is probably not going to happen until later in the spring. That had been a thing we were hoping to perhaps have done by this time, but hasn't happened. The good news is that the Tri-County area, and we think of Tri-County meaning Hamilton, Boone, and Marion, continues to have downward trending, or positive in the right direction trending in terms of average positivity rate and daily case rate. So we're right below 5%, and we're averaging about, this is just the data from this week, 137 new cases per 100,000 people in the Tri-County area. So overall, like I said, we believe we have protocols in place that are keeping our community safe. We're happy with how safe we have been. We've not had to do massive quarantining. The biggest quarantining that we've had to do is with athletics. But we, for the most part, have had very little transmission on campus, very little COVID presence on campus. That's in part because of the protocols we have in place, but in part because all of you have been helping us and partnering in making sure your kids are staying home when they don't feel well, getting tested, notifying us if they've been a close contact, and just being responsible overall for the health of the community. So that is kind of the current snapshot of COVID in our school. Dr. Vesper is now going to talk about some of the new guidelines and some of the things we're thinking about as we think about bringing everyone back on campus.
Hey, thanks, Alicia. So a lot of stuff has come out in the last couple of weeks, some of which gets transmitted mainly in the terms of catchphrases. So Indiana DOE started talking about 3-foot spacing a little while ago. And actually, in the end of December, CDC started talking about what about 7-day quarantines versus 10-day quarantines as opposed to 14. And likewise, most recently, there was some information from the CDC about wearing 2 masks, as well as with much fanfare, a plan for reopening schools. And I'm going to talk about each one of these a little bit, but the essence of all of these is that there is now more refined guidance and more details that fundamentally affirm what we've been doing since August, and there is not anything we need to change. And so, for instance, 3-foot spacing, what that means is it is still true, the CDC still says, if you're going to open your school and you have any kind of positivity rate in the community around you, you need to be 6 feet apart. However, state of Indiana has said if you are 3 feet apart, everyone facing the same direction and not interacting, then you don't have to do contact tracing because transmission is pretty low. That being said, the way the school is set up, we can't easily have people 3 feet apart, all facing the same direction, fitting in rooms. And that is also a possibility. 3 feet, it is not a recommendation, it is not a requirement. It's just an acknowledgement that at 3 feet apart, you don't have as much transmission, but 6 feet is still better. Likewise, the CDC has refined 14-day quarantines to say if you're asymptomatic, and depending on if you have a test or not, if there is a need, if somebody is an essential worker, they could come back after 7 days potentially or 10 days with increased risk, right? And this mainly is targeted at businesses where now the business can't work, or for a lot of Indianapolis schools, they've said they have no effective remote learning option. And so a student being out for 4 more days versus 10, that in and of itself is negative. And you have to balance that out with the increased risk of bringing in somebody back onto school after 10 days. So IPS, for instance, has said 10 days you can come back into school. For us, because of the e-learning structure we've had built in, there is not huge negative effect in somebody being out 4 more days, and there is still the slightly increased risk. So we see no particular reason to change a 14-day quarantine down to a 10-day quarantine unless there's specific circumstances for that student that make those extra 4 days particularly egregious. Finally, while wearing 2 masks is almost definitely better than one, we see no need and actually no need to require 2 masks. So many students are wearing 2 masks and some faculty are. Last thing about reopening schools, the CDC put out information titled, plan for reopening schools. That plan, which I can talk in as much detail as you want about it, basically says you can reopen schools as long as you have everyone 6 feet apart and everyone is wearing a mask and they're washing their hands and paying attention to getting testing when they get sick. It's basically exactly what we've been doing since August. They've now affirmed some of the details. They do say that 6 feet, if you have very low positivity in your community, 6 feet when possible, versus when you have relatively high positivity in your community, it's just 6 feet flat out. And so that is a little bit of a change. But for us, the positivity rate, even though it is improving, is still at a range where we wouldn't consider getting less than 6 feet. So we're very aware of all these things that have come out. And again, I can talk in more detail as you have questions, but the essence of the issue is that for us, functionally, nothing has changed until possibly down the road when the positivity rate gets really low. And that leads us partially into next fall. 2 things I did want to mention that we are actually thinking about changing. One, we've had seating charts all semester. We've been tracking all year, really. We've been tracking where people sit all day, so that way we can do good contact tracing. The relaxed standards on contact tracing means that while we're still sitting 6 feet apart, we're not recording where everyone sits every day all the time. That level of paperwork basically became performative. It maybe made some people feel nice, but it didn't have any effect because we don't need it. So we got rid of our seating charts. The other thing we're looking seriously at is for our seniors that now have gone almost a year without all being together, can we get the entire senior class on campus and still maintain our current protocols? And the short answer is for most classes, generally, yes, we can get very close to having all the seniors on campus at the same time. And what we have to work out, you might imagine, is let's say my son Daniel is a senior. If he comes onto campus every week and 3 of his 7 classes, there's just too many people to be 6 feet apart. So in those classes, somebody is going to go sit in Andrews Hall, in our big hall, and they will Zoom into class. They're still here most of the day with their friends. In fact, they're on campus all day. But for specific classes, they can't get into the room. We're trying to work out with the seniors what is an equitable way to do some kind of a rotation. So again, all the seniors can be on campus. We can maintain 6-foot spacing, but still have them all here. The other consideration, besides some people taking their classes, some specific classes in Andrews Hall, is we want the weather to be nice so everyone feels comfortable sitting outside for lunch. So this is something we're looking at for after spring break, where we have physically enough room to spread out. With that, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions. I'm actually going to stop sharing for a second and check the chat. And yeah, so yeah. Dr. Kressel pointed out, a good fit mask is more important than 2 masks. A good fit mask is everything, a good mask and a good fit mask. I want to see if there's any questions before I start talking about next fall. So I'm scanning real quick, and Nyla, if you had anything you want to hype up.
I will say, Dave, you mentioned the CDC guidelines. We are still, everyone color codes their system slightly differently. We are, as of a few days ago, still at orange in terms of CDC because the number of cases per 100,000 people is high in this area. If we got down to green, if we got down under 100 cases per day, we'd be in yellow. If we got down into green, that would be where we'd look more at relaxing the social distancing, but we're not entirely, we're not there yet. We are trending that way, but not there yet.
Okay. And yeah, as Dr. Kessel pointed out, good fit, and we're actually re-engaging with the students again, reminding people, because complacency can sit in, about good practices with their masks and washing hands. I will say, as a practical matter, the thing we least comply with is good hand washing, I would predict. But hand washing is always important. But if you're going to pick 2 of 3 of wearing a good mask, staying 6 feet apart, and washing your hands regularly, hand washing is where we'll take the biggest hit. I just have been watching my students, and I'm not sure that that is done as well as the others. But overall, things are well.
We do have one question that's come in.
Yeah.
Is what is the university's stance of the travel guidance to other states outside of Indiana and being required to quarantine for 14 days? And does it apply to only if the said student travels, or if family member travels but student does not travel? If the travel is for medical purposes, not leisure?
Yeah, so what we're doing, if you travel overseas, you need to quarantine for 14 days, period. And that's pretty consistent with CDC guidelines. There's actually, depending on the country, there's now some standards about if you take a test within 3 days of travel, blah, blah, blah. It is, it varies by country. It also depends, to be blunt, on where you look sometimes. Even within the CDC's website, there's some inconsistencies over time. But if you travel internationally, we're asking you to quarantine for 14 days. For any domestic travel, we are asking you to contact Stacy Summit Mann, who basically talks people through what exactly they are doing. If you hop in a car with your immediate family, drive to a cabin in the mountains of Tennessee, hang out for a week and come back, your exposure is much less than if you're sitting here in Carmel and going to parties with friends, right? So it is really about what you're doing on the trip, but traveling across state lines in and of itself is irrelevant. It is what you're doing when you travel. And so we are asking everyone to talk directly to Ms. Summit Mann. But somebody, for instance, who is driving to visit a college where they are doing a walking tour outside, self-paced, and then they are coming back, that does not seem of any particular concern for us and would not require a quarantine. But if you're attending a wedding, attending a bunch of social activities, hanging out on beaches with a lot of friends in Florida during spring break, then you probably should quarantine. Yeah. And so our policy is international, you need to quarantine. Otherwise, talk to us and we will help you understand what is appropriate.
Yeah, Marion County right now has a fairly strict quarantine advisement list of quarantining after travel to certain states whose rate is higher than positivity in Marion County. But we've not adopted that policy for university, and since we're in Hamilton County, we're not held to it.
Are there other immediate questions before I start talking about the fall?
The only other question that came in was about athletic plans for particular sports that are coming up.
Yeah, so for spring sports, in general, we're going to do what we ended up doing for winter sports. That is, all the sports are happening. We'll have IHS AA competition. And for instance, for golf, you will see fundamentally an unmodified sport, much like we did for golf in the fall. Likewise, tennis is not significantly modified, other than every team will have their own balls. You will never pick up physically balls from the other team. Really, every player brings in their own balls. They hit them. They're the only ones that touch them. For track and field, we are going to accept, as we did with basketball, increased risk by people running next to each other. So what it will amount to is that if a team member comes in direct contact with somebody else who has COVID, the entire team will quarantine. And that's what we're doing with basketball in both sides. So basically, it's a higher risk activity. The entire team quarantines if something happens. And we did not split hairs on, Dave was in the first quarter and Alicia was in the second quarter and Nyla had COVID and she came in the third quarter. It's like, no, just the whole team quarantines and moves on. So we don't want to put people in a maybe a little bit subjective defensive stance of trying to parse differences. If you're playing basketball and somebody on the team quarantines, the whole team is period. We're done. And that's what we've been doing and that's fine. So for the higher contact sports, which is really track and field, and to a lesser extent baseball and softball, that's what we will do. And we've been effective with the other sports. Again, for golf and tennis, there is less direct contact. And writ large, I'll say spring sports are the least risky of any season. They're all outdoor, right? No basketball. And with the exception of baseball, that is the closest contact sport. And if you think about baseball, that is not nearly the contact sport that football is, say, or even soccer or basketball. So that is our plan for spring. Okay, I guess one more. Any final questions before I go back to to fall? Okay, so as we look at fall, key things we wanted to emphasize, our expectation is that everyone is starting on campus. And this is fundamentally tied to what Alicia brought out. We would reasonably expect positive, prevalence rates to be really low, mainly because there should be a widely disseminated vaccine. Even though probably most of our freshmen may not be eligible yet. There's testing for people younger than 16 right now, but let's say some of the freshmen are not eligible for the vaccine. If everyone else in our community has a vaccine, all the adults or everyone who wants it, and prevalence is really low, it seems reasonable to start with everyone on campus. We have to work out exactly what an e-learning option might look like for a student that wants it for some reason. And likewise, it still may be that we will have community meeting without 350 people in one room, but still do that with people in their individual classrooms and us broadcasting stuff out. There still may be some accommodations for the fact that COVID will still exist in the world, but we expect fundamentally to not be in hybrid. Everyone's on. Second, we know that our freshmen and sophomores, our freshmen next year won't know us like all new freshmen. Our sophomores next year only know us as a school that is hybrid, right? They've only known us as a school that is at half capacity. And in fact, it is a little bit enlightening to realize that next year, our seniors will be the only students who have been on our campus for 12 months at a time and seen an entire school full. Nobody else has had a complete year. So we're going to be very deliberate, as we always are, about freshmen, but also about sophomores, because they are not used to the campus as it exists. For instance, we are contemplating are both the freshmen and the sophomores having retreats. Normally, we always have a freshman retreat. Our sophomores next year will have missed that, so we may well have one for them. Third thing we're looking at is academic continuity. We know that many of our courses are not going to complete all the content they would have completed in a normal year, and we owe it to all the students. Much as we did last August, we need to assess where we are in June, and so next August, we're starting the students off where we know they are. Fourth, we want to continue our equity and justice work. This year, as Alicia noted, it's been focused on anti-racist work, but equity and justice is broader than that, and we want to continue building the equity and justice work we've done in the last year, and actually for the last several years, but we continue to build. And finally, we want to be ready for rapid change. It is hopeful for everybody that society gets to a point where we are past a pandemic. It is also entirely reasonable that 6 months or 12 months or 5 years from now, there'll be another pandemic or a meteor strike or an earthquake or who knows what. And so we did a relatively good job, I think, adapting quickly when the pandemic hit, and we want to continue to be ready to continue shift as need be. That being said, there is value in stability, there is efficiency in stability, right? And so we want to have the student experience be as stable as we can. With that, we'll open it up to questions either about next year or anything else. Okay, so Ellen Shellhouse asked about the scheduling. So I'll take a minute for this because some of you, if your parents are freshmen, don't know what we've done in the past. So this year we will have, this year we have a schedule where basically we have a 2-day rotation, R1 and R2. We rotate on our schedule. Also in that schedule, we had 15-minute passing periods initially. We ramped them down to 10 minutes now. We have academic flex time every day, and we have seminar periods every other day. That's our current schedule. And we put in the longer passing periods to allow people to wash their hands and get outside and maybe take a break from wearing their masks. So if you remember when we set this up in August, the idea of wearing a mask all day in school was something that was new to everyone. To be blunt, right now, people wear their masks all day and it's fine. It's not a big deal, but we set it up for that. Our historical schedule, we have a 5-day rotation where over the course of a week, the students meet 4 times for each class, right? 3 times a normal meeting, 1 day you don't meet, and 1 day you have a double meeting so you can do things like science labs. And what is not clear to us is what schedule we're going to do next year. I can assure you school starts at 8:30, it ends at 3:15. So in terms of like mass scheduling, when you're dropping your students off, that is not going to change. But we are looking at the advantages and disadvantages we've had for both the previous schedule and this schedule. And so we're going to try and take lessons learned out of what has happened in COVID and come up with a best schedule for next year. We hope to have that done by spring break. So we'll be able to tell everyone what we're going to have. Yeah, J-term, we think next winter, we're going to have J-term in January. And we are going to, right now, I told all the faculty, go ahead and plan domestic trips. Because of the long planning time, we're saying no international trips right now, just because it is hard to say what other countries in the world are going to be like in January. Most will be good, I think. Things overall are getting better. But right now, we've said domestic trips for sure, but let's hold off on international trips for 1 more year. So that's the planning guidance we've given the faculty.
And as far as this J term, we are, you know, if you remember, we talked in the fall semester, we had a plan to have everyone on campus, not in hybrid for our January term, and we're going to have it in January. That is still our plan for May. We can use space differently during January term because of how the classes are potted and how we can assess some things. And we've got a few classes that are actually going to use off-campus spaces. So the film class will be at the Can Theater, where we've rented it out and we're having it cleaned to our standards and all of those things. So we should be able to have everyone on campus for January term in May. We are not calling it May term because we don't want to rebrand it, but we should have everyone on campus for that. There will likely not be long travel involved, but some of our classes are looking at expanding their day trips, specifically like the wilderness leadership class may do more overnights. The architecture class may do some more travel to different cities, and we're continuing to figure that out. But New Orleans, certainly the Rwanda class is not traveling to Rwanda. Those longer trips we're not comfortable having yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going through all the questions here. So we've not considered a senior retreat. We talked about some special event for seniors, and I'd be interested in hearing from ideas for them. But they had a freshman retreat on the one hand. On the other hand, they've also had a rather disruptive end of junior year and senior year. So we want to acknowledge that, but we're not considering a different senior retreat.
Yeah. There were some questions about other spring events. We are planning a prom. It will be outdoors in a tent we're not having a meal. There'll be a dessert buffet. We will have dancing. We will have to work, and we're working with the health department on what socially distant dancing for teenagers looks like. I'm sure it will be very exciting to chaperone. But we do want to try and have as many of those senior significant spring events as we can. Daniel Knox did a great job having music concerts outdoors in the fall, and he is looking to do that again in the spring. Callie Hartz is going to have a musical. We are looking at renting the pavilion at Cool Creek Park in Carmel to have that, just because we need a better sound system than we can port out to the side of the soccer field every day. So we are looking at trying to have those regular outdoor events. Nyla, what have we missed?
There were a couple of sports questions. One of them was, will it be open soccer fields, or will soccer be having open fields? And then also, is it going to be only parents at spring sports, or will that be open to other spectators?
Yeah, so on the parents question, for because they're all outdoor, we will be more open about who can come. And especially for the events that happen at UHS, we can have larger crowds, right? As many golf people who want to come watch golf, you can watch golf probably because we can socially distance and be outside for that. I don't want to speak on behalf of round trippers where we do baseball and softball. They may have a restrictive policy, and we actually have a meeting with them next week where we're going to find out exactly what that is based on their sizing and space. So I don't want to speak on behalf of baseball and softball. Parents will definitely be allowed. The question is how much more open it is, but that depends on their spacing.
Saw the question too about how the racial justice and equity work is going this year. We've been focusing this year largely with the faculty. It's been the intense focus. So we've been working with Favorite Part of My Day, which is a racial equity training organization here. It's actually Cassandra Porter, one of our parents, is the owner of it and consultant with it. They have been our partner though for years before Cassandra's students came to university. So we've been working with the faculty on talking about systemic issues of race, how race shows up in the system, how we can ensure access to people of all backgrounds to our programs. With the students, we are doing work. We started with summer reading, continued through the seminar periods. We're doing, sorry, this is my cat. We're doing work that is interesting this year, doing a lot of collaborative work between clubs. So, for example, a couple weeks ago, the Jewish Affinity Group put together a presentation on what it means to be of African descent and be Jewish. So we had some cross collaboration there. There was a presentation on mental health and how that can play out in issues of race or LGBTQ issues. So we're doing continuous programming with the students, but a lot of our focus work right now, this particular year, has been with the faculty.
We've had a question about, can you explain what seminar is? There's a rumor that some students don't care for it.
So you want me to go, Alicia? Yeah. Yeah, so part of it, I mean, I'll give you back. We have 7 classes, 7 class periods. If we have a 2-day rotation, 7 doesn't divide into 2 easily. So we've made 8 class periods, the 8th of which is seminar. Now, historically, every Friday, we've had an assembly since the school was founded. And that assembly has been a long class. We had guest speakers in, or we've done some administrative work on campus. How do we register? Things like that. We put in seminar periods every other day with the idea of taking the assemblies, but also using that for more community building and culture building time than we've had in the past. So some of the seminar periods are things like around spring break, we're going to have registration. Here's classes for next year. This is how you register. Some of them are student-led U-Learns, where students will present things they think are cool to their peers. They want to teach a class real quick. But it's also where we talk about summer reading. And heading into the election, we talked about voting systems. How does voting work in the nation? During Black History Month, we saw a movie last week about James Baldwin. And this week, actually, we're going to watch Drumline to celebrate different aspects of historically Black colleges and universities and African-American experience in that context. So they've been a variety of things. I will say there at the end of the day, and upon occasion, students' energy will be lower, and they at times are not as engaged as they might be in a direct class. That is certainly a fact. And we are working to make them more engaging. I think we had a very engaging one on vaccines and how they spread, and had everyone making simulations, because I ran that, right? So that's why I'll say it'll good. So ask your students about how vaccines spread and the effect of, how infections spread and the effect of vaccines, right? They should be able to show you a nice simulation of that. But yeah, go ahead, Alicia.
Well, I was going to say, it is, as Dave said, it basically replaces the time of our assemblies for those of you who've had kids here in the past. But, when we refine this prototype, if we were to include the seminar periods again, we would probably not put them at the end of the day. This is a thing we wanted to add in the schedule, and it's what we tried for this year. And there was a question earlier about what will you keep for the schedule for next year? And this may be a thing that if we keep, is not at the end of the day, because I think that's weighing on some of the students.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has asked if you could speak to student achievement in the pandemic or any kind of assessment about trends in virtual learning.
I mean, I can't say comparatively, we do analysis of grades well, we do it at midterms when you have your conferences, and we do it again at the end of the semester. And we are not seeing dramatic, um, significantly different like grade report, like overall school GPA is about what it typically is. We did have a number of students in the first semester, we had a higher number of students taking incompletes that they had work to finish, but I think that is because of quarantining in the winter as rates rose and infection rose. So we added some more incompletes than we normally do. But academic performance, I think, I don't know, Dave, if you have direct data, is on par. The other indicator that I think is interesting is we do this course evaluation tool called the Wellington Engagement Index that judges engagement, which they define as the intersection between liking the class and being challenged in it. So the kids actually plot on a graph where the axis is how challenged you are and how much you enjoy the class. Our scores are typically high. They're typically between 67 and 70% engagement. And that we've maintained that throughout the pandemic. The students still find their classes engaging. What I found interesting this fall is Wellington, the school that created this and runs it, released their national data. And if you take our data compared to what they released, which is from June of 2019 through June of 2020, so just the beginning of the pandemic, our engagement scores are 10% higher than all of the other private schools who use the metric and 25% higher than the public schools. So I'm particularly pleased to see that, and I'll be interested to see how that plays out now that we've done a whole year in the pandemic. But compared to ourselves pre-pandemic, I believe we're seeing the same amount of academic success. There's content that's not getting covered. As Dave said, we're talking to teachers about how to adjust for that, so we make sure that Spanish 3 picks up where Spanish 2 left off, or that kids need something in pre-calculus that they didn't get in algebra 2, that we can account for that. But I think academic performance is on par.
Yeah, it's fundamentally a hard question because you're teaching a different class in a different format, right? So you're comparing apples to oranges. If we say, what are the grades this semester? Grades are about the same. We're teaching differently. Most teachers will say, A, they're being effective. They're also continuously frustrated because they're inventing new techniques and they don't feel as comfortable in this format. Even though we've tried a lot of work and your students have tried a lot, people don't feel comfortable in this format because it's not what they're used to. I was at a conference where people talked about everyone is a first-year teacher this year, right? And that is harder for everyone. The only external measures we have are things like college acceptances, so which again is colleges are taking students, taking where the world is, right? And we're having good success with our college, with our seniors right now. And then AP scores, and we're going to have to see what happens with AP scores. Last year, AP was kind of at some level a disaster. The tests rolled out late. They had different formats. They had different setups. So, and the scores were all over the place. It was kind of amazing. So we're not sure what will happen with the AP scores, but I do know that colleges continue to assess APs differently than they did before, based on the fact that they know perfectly well that students are having a different experience.
Dave, we have a question about when AP exams are. Do you have the slide of how to walk through the rest of the semester? Maybe we could show.
Yeah, let me bring that up. And I will say, I'm going to show you these slides. There is a high level of detail on some of them, and on some of them, that level of detail is like 24 hours out of date. So if you're quick on taking notes and you see something, don't hold me to every single fragment of everything that's on here. That being said.
And while Dave pulls that up, I saw the question, are students required to take their AP exams? We do encourage them, strongly encourage them to. If there's some reason that a student feels they cannot sit for the exam or are underprepared, we would work with that student.
And that's basically the same as every year. If a student doesn't show up for the AP exam, we don't fail them. It's like, well, that kind of sucked. You missed an opportunity, but we don't make them. Also, there was a question in the chat, are we going to require vaccinations? And if COVID is available, let's assume COVID is available to 14-year-olds, are we going to require it? The short answer is I think we will comply with the Department of Health. There's a whole suite of vaccinations they require, and then they have some specific exemptions around medical background or sincerely held religious beliefs, is the phrase used. And I would imagine COVID will be in the same boat. And so we do not plan as a school to require COVID vaccines separate from the state requiring them, if that makes sense. Okay. For the schedule for the rest of the semester, a couple of things I want to highlight, and you kind of see here. So actually, I'll back up one. This is our modified schedule Alicia talked about, where we move things around a little bit. Conferences are coming up March 12th. So midterms are coming up on March 12th. That's earlier. It's not spring break. Should be no surprise, but different way of thinking about things. We'll then go through to spring break, April 2nd. I will highlight for parents of juniors, we have SAT Day, March 24th. That means if you want to take the SAT, this is voluntary. It's something you have to subscribe for, but we're offering the SAT during the day if you want to take it. So you don't have to go off to Brebeuf or some other place. And you can thank, I won't name them, but one of my mentees' parents for bringing that suggestion to us, and we invoked it. And they're on this call, but I won't call them out. Anyway, we have spring break, very nice. And then after spring break, we get into the final part of the semester, including APs. AP exams are on the same time, same places they always were. So getting into May 3rd here, in the afternoon is AP Physics. In the morning of May 4th is AP Calc. In the morning of the 5th, AP Literature, etc. This is all the normal schedule. The only thing that may seem that is kind of weird, two things, I suppose. One, AP Stats would have normally been on May 13th, which is Eid al-Fitr, the end of Ramadan, Muslim holiday. We are taking that day off, so that test is actually moved later. Also, and this is sad for some of our students maybe, May 14th, we have a faculty workday. So we've had final exams, the semester is over, we get a 4-day weekend before we start J-term, except all our AP Bio students have to come in on May 14th and take AP Biology. That is the way the schedule has worked out, unfortunately. And then going into January term itself, January term starts on May 17th, and in the afternoon, all our AP Stat students are taking their exam. This is the awkward consequence of moving January term away from May. You know, we think it was beneficial, we think it was a net good thing, but this is an awkward consequence for that. And then to finish off the semester, we have 3 weeks of J-term, which includes, normally we would have Memorial Day weekend, we'd have 3 days of final exams, and then we'd be done on June 3rd. It's still the same schedule, except June 1st, June 2nd, June 3rd are not exams. They are the 3 full days of J-term. And I will highlight the J-term symposium on June 3rd. That is a day when the January term students share what they have learned over January term. It is a day sometimes when parents come in to watch. We would like you to have that opportunity. We need to figure out how to broadcast that, because we've done pretty good with broadcasting. Our intention is not necessarily to have 100 parents coming onto campus and going into classrooms to watch all this stuff, but we intend on being able to broadcast those so you can watch your students present on their January term experiences. So that was a long way to say that AP exams are the dates they were published last year, and they'll continue that way. There is the possibility that one class may have to shift something, and for students that for some reason can't come on campus and take the pen and paper test, there are electronic home exam makeups 2 and 3 weeks later that are options for individual circumstances. Yeah, so what if the AP exam falls on a religious holiday? The key one is Eid al-Fitr, and we have no exams there. And then if somebody else has a religious reason they can't be in an exam, or they're sick, or a wedding, or whatever, there are makeups 2 and 3 weeks later. Other questions?
We're all scanning to make sure we've caught
Yeah.
them all.
We do expect that, so once vaccines become more prevalent, there's a couple different questions, so I'm going to tie them together in a bigger answer. Once all our faculty are vaccinated, we expect them to be on campus. Right? We have some faculty whose personal situation makes it medically unwise for them to be on campus right now, and once they're vaccinated, then they should be here. Likewise, if we want to think about fall for a minute, and I'll contrast that with now. So right now, if on Tuesday, Chris Morrison decides that Olivia needs to be in e-learning because he's nervous about COVID, he can just call us and say, hey, I'm pulling Olivia into e-learning, and that's fine. She goes. And we, for us, have to make lesson plans that accommodate a significant fraction of students being in e-learning and a significant not. Next year, we'd reasonably expect the vast majority of students are on campus, period. There are maybe reasons why specific students have to be off campus, but that will be for us, we think, we haven't pinned down all the details, but we think that there'll be a higher threshold for that. We need to understand why. And yes, there may be people whose medical situation means they can't. There may be people, for instance, who may have some international students that are still in China trying to get visas straight for 2 months, right, and get back. We will try and accommodate them. But in general, the expectation is everyone will be on campus. It will only be online for specific exemptions, as opposed to right now where, to be blunt, it is very much casual, because we don't want to put you in a position of trying to justify your decision. We think it is a reasonable decision that you want somebody at home. It's also reasonable you want them hybrid here. We think both are reasonable. And I'm scanning a little bit.
I think we've hit them all. Nyla, have we missed any?
Yeah.
Not that I can see.
Okay.
If I've missed any ones, I am so sorry.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to type it in again. Pop up.
I think the question came again about if the COVID vaccine is mandatory.
Yeah, so the way we're going to look at vaccinations being mandatory is they are as mandatory as every other vaccine that the state makes mandatory, meaning if the state of Indiana, the Indiana Department of Health, updates their vaccination list to require a COVID vaccine, then yes, it's mandatory. But we don't plan as a school to require it. Now, we may do something. I mean, this is entirely speculative, right? If we are as a society at a point where you don't have to wear a mask if you've been vaccinated, then maybe if you have not vaccinated, you have to wear a mask, right? But that is, if CDC guidelines came out and said something like that, that is entirely speculative. Yeah, we don't have driver's ed, right? But I can recommend some good programs. I have 3 boys that all generally drive safely and have had good training.
All right. Well, if we think we've hit everything, then Dave, I don't know if you want to pull up the last slide you had.
Yes.
Which is, if you saw in the blast or saw my email, you do not have to sit more on Zoom tonight if you don't want to. We can send you a recording. But we have partnered with the Independent School Association of the Central States, which is our accrediting body, on 4 parent webinars, topics related to this year, to the pandemic, to racial unrest, to study skills. The first one is this evening. If you've registered for it, you can participate live in the Isaacs webinar. You can also get a recording of it we can send out to you. And then we will have follow-up university-specific discussions the Mondays after these presentations. So the idea is you could see this, some nationally renowned speakers talking about this topic. And then if you're interested, join Dave, myself, and some other assorted university professionals to talk about these issues and how they play out in our school. So we welcome you to join those, as many or as few as you would like.
Yeah, we just asked, we did send out a form. We'll send it again in the blast. We'll send it every week. Please sign up, because the webinars will only let you know about them, or you'll only see them if you sign up. If, for instance, you have an interest in tonight's and have not yet signed up, please send in the form anyway. You won't see it live, but we'll send you the link for the recording so you can watch it before Monday, when you'll hear from us. And in that case, Ellen Wallerstein, our Director of Support Services, who has a degree in executive functioning, a lot of experience, who will talk about how we think about that at UHS.
Okay. One last question about mental health of students. We continue to check in via mentoring. We have been trying to provide space in the day for relaxation, for that long flex time. for brain breaks when they're at home. It's largely mentoring that we're doing. We have been talking about stress management. We did some seminars on that in the fall. We're doing some more coming up here in March with the students. Mentors have been working this year really to take mental health account of their students as best they can, to be checking in, to be maintaining that connection in this disparate Zoom-based world. And we continue to work on that through the mentoring program. Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the kudos in the chat. Like I said at the beginning, the school works as well as it does because you send us amazing kids and you become amazing partners with us in this work. So thank you to everyone. If you have follow-up questions, don't be afraid to send them to Dave or myself or Nyla Neely, and we'll find the right person to answer them. So thank you all and have a good night.
Good evening.